Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star's daily sports podcast. It's Tuesday, September 8th, and I'm Blair Kerkhoff. Football season is happening at Kansas State in Kansas. At least the games are on the schedule for Saturday, with the Wildcats meeting Arkansas State and KU taking on Coastal Carolina. But already, two Big 12 teams have had to scrap Saturday games because of COVID-19. Fingers crossed that will not become the case in Manhattan or Lawrence. Beat writers Kellis, Robinett, and Jesse Newell are here to talk about the college football season in the COVID world and what to expect on Saturday in those games. So let's get going with Kellis and Jesse. Okay, guys, Kansas State and Kansas are playing football on Saturday, right?
We hope so.
I mean, it's on the schedule. Both teams are playing. The Wildcats taking on Arkansas State at 2:30, and KU in a grudge match with Coastal Carolina at the convenient time of 9 p.m. in Lawrence. But we've already seen where two games that were scheduled involving Big 12 teams this week are now off the schedule. We know that the Tulsa at Oklahoma State game has been moved to the 19th because of problems with COVID on the Tulsa team, and TCU and SMU were supposed to play on Saturday. TCU having COVID issues, that game has been wiped off the schedule, at least for Saturday, and there's, I guess, some talk that the teams are looking at trying to find a mutual date to play that game. So, you know, both Chris Klieman and Les Miles spoke to the media on Monday, on Monday. They're supposed to, I know Klieman and K-State having another media day today. Really, I mean, I asked it facetiously, but is the COVID news such that we're pretty 100% sure these games are going to come off on Saturday? Kellis, I'll start with you.
I mean, I'm not willing to say I'm 100% confident about anything right now. I mean, just look at the numbers in the Big 12. They were supposed to have two games played, and they've already been postponed. So 2 for 2 in the negative department there. I personally think Kansas State and Arkansas State will get played. It's one of those things I keep pestering people in the athletic department about it, and they say that if the game were right now, they'd go ahead and play it. But you know, they've had players in and out throughout practice. It'll be very interesting to see who they actually have available to play at wide receiver in this game. If some players need breathers, I think they could be using some very unusual players on the offensive line. And if things, you know, happen to get worse between now and Saturday, I'm not saying it's outside the realm of possibility that it does get postponed. Right now, I think it will be played, but I can't say 100%. I'd be more like 80%.
Let's get the KU update from Jesse, and then I want to ask both of you guys about fans and other just precautions that the schools are taking. But Jesse, how about Kansas? 9 p.m. game against the Chanticleers. We don't know. We don't have numbers from KU. Just Les Miles assuring everybody that we're going to be okay.
Yeah, that's interesting too, because KU has been pretty forthright with numbers, and with even Les Miles in a couple previous weeks to basically say they had nobody in quarantine. So kind of the gist I still get is that KU obviously went through its bad stretch earlier, and since then it hasn't seemed as bad. But again, without them giving the exact numbers and Les Miles sort of hiding behind HIPAA rules, we don't know those exact. I think the bigger concern for this game potentially would be the Coastal Carolina team, because you're talking about a school that has had issues. There was a story a couple weeks back basically talking about the football team was sort of working around the issues it had with COVID. And even Coastal Carolina's coach earlier this week being asked those same questions you were asking, Blair, like, are you going to have all your guys? Are you going to be full strength? And basically kind of shrugging his shoulders and saying, I don't know. We'll see, that sort of thing. So I think everybody's kind of up in the air on that. But yeah, Coastal Carolina down in South Carolina, as we know, that's one of those states that potentially has been hit harder than many other of the other ones out there. And they're having to follow the Big 12 standards, the Monday, Wednesday, Friday testing. So I think I'm in Kellis's boat here. I think this game will get played. I think that they'll have a game, and at that beautiful time of 9 p.m. for those folks on the West Coast, I think that thing is going to happen. But right now, I don't think we can be sure about anything. And especially with those cancellations, it does kind of keep in the back of your mind that sort of thing can happen.
How far can we go till game time before we know? Is it is there a time limit on this? Do they have to know by Friday whether it's is the final test, the final test on Friday, test results? What kind of timetable are we looking at in terms of a cancellation?
The way it's been explained to me is that they'll do the antigen, the rapid tests on Fridays. They should be testing both teams, and as long as they'll evaluate those numbers, whenever that happens, Friday morning, Friday afternoon, then that would be like the drop dead time when they have to make a decision. Because obviously you don't want a team, if they got to fly into a game, you don't want them flying all the way there and then saying, "Ooh, whoops, these numbers don't look good, fly on back home." So I would think by early Friday morning they'll have all the numbers they need, all the data that's required to make a final decision on the game. And as we've seen, it looks like as long as a team has 53 players and available players, and of those 53, as long as you got a quarterback, 7 offensive linemen, 1 or 2 defensive tackles, the expectation is they'll play. Maybe there is a scenario where a team could just lose every single guy at a position, and then that changes things. But they want these games to be played, and I think as long as the numbers come back favorable, like I just said, more than 53 healthy players on Friday afternoon, they'll move forward.
Yeah, it's a 7-4-1 formula. I think I saw, right. You got to have a 53-man roster, which coincidentally is the NFL size roster, and 7 of them have to be offensive linemen, 4 defensive linemen, and 1 quarterback available on that 53-man roster, final roster for a game day. I thought that was interesting. And Kellis didn't. We have heard again from Chris Klieman, and he kind of hinted around that look, they're gonna dig deep into the depth chart perhaps to make sure that they can field a team this Saturday. He's not a sarcastic guy or anything. He's pretty serious when he says that they're going to have some issues. They possibly could have some issues depth chart wise.
Yeah, I believe him. I take him at his word there. I was a little surprised to hear him say that every single player who has eligibility and is available will be playing in this game. That means you'll see some players who, in normal circumstances, would do nothing more than warm up this time of year. But without red shirts to worry about, and with a lot of players out and just unavailable for this game for various reasons, whether it be injuries, positive tests, quarantine, whatever it be, I do think you'll see many more players than usual taking a few snaps, even if it's 4 or 5 here or there, to give people breathers. And like I mentioned earlier, the biggest question mark for me is wide receiver. I think throughout camp, that's just been a position where it's just kind of every day they don't know who's going to be there. Their offensive coordinator said last week they've taken their second, third, fourth string running backs, and they've been training them to play receiver just in case. I think that you might see some defensive backs get some looks at slot receiver or something like that. So certainly the hope is that as the season goes along, that stuff will calm down and you'll have more of traditional 2 deep, the people who are listed on actually playing. But this first game could be wild with some of the combinations they throw out there in terms of personnel.
Hey, and Jesse, should we be surprised that it's kind of come to this, that we're approaching the first game for Big 12 programs? 2 have already, as we said, not opted out, but have had to adjust their schedules. The campuses have been open for these athletes since June, and the players basically lived in a bubble through June, July, and into August, and then campus reopened for students, and now we have another set of issues for these college teams. I guess I answered my own question there, right? I mean, we shouldn't be shocked that this is happening. That college football is off to a little bit of a shaky start.
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak for Douglas County here, but you obviously follow the cases that are in your county, and for a while that thing shot up. I mean, it went off of the charts that the graphs previously had in this particular county, and a lot of that is the student population coming back to campus, and it's the people that you would expect. And you mentioned the bubble. I think it's proven to work. If you look at how MLS had their season, how the TBT was able to get theirs in, the NBA has had great success with it. So that sort of thing seems to be very successful. It's just basically impossible to do in a college football setting. And so you're asking these students, or I guess now we still refer to them as student athletes, but you're asking these athletes to stay away from places that they really can't stay away from if they're having in-person classes. So yeah, I think some of this was probably to be expected, and we'll see how this sort of thing runs its course and how many postponements there have to be. But I guess I'm fascinating, Blair. I don't. How are you a sports bettor right now? You know, those people out there that have these lines. Kellis is talking about cornerbacks playing wide receiver. I mean, how do you have a number on these games? You know what I mean? It's going to be fascinating to see if there's anything close to what these odds makers are putting out there, just because COVID could really throw these teams for a loop. And if you have some information in there to know that these guys aren't playing, then potentially I'm thinking you could have a pretty good edge. And we'll have to pay attention to those numbers, because some of these games you might think, hey, team A is much better than team B, but if Team A is putting out there all their second stringers, then obviously things can change in a hurry.
And there are numbers on these games. It is. I'm trying to, as I'm scrambling to get. Do you know off the top of your head what I got it right here? KU is
by 10. I can tell you that.
K-State by 10. Mm-hmm. And I think I've got KU by consensus. KU by 7. Actually opened up at 3.5.
Yeah,
and
Blair, I'll put my tinfoil hat on here for you. I talked about Coastal Carolina potentially having problems. If I'm putting my tinfoil hat on here and saying, hey, that line went from 3.5 to 7, and I saw some spots last week where potentially Coastal Carolina was favored. That tells me, sets some alarm bells off, that potentially Coastal Carolina is having some problems with COVID on some of their positions there. So, yeah, this sort of thing is going to be fascinating. And not only that, you add in the home field advantage that normally comes with these games. KU, potentially a topic we'll get to, but does not have any fans. So, okay, is that 2 or 3 points down? So there's so many factors to take into consideration here. But yeah, watch those Vegas lines. If you see some wacky things happening, we might have some indicators here that some of these teams are not themselves.
Well, wasn't last night, wasn't Navy actually favored against BYU before they lost by 95?
If that's the case, I didn't know that. If that's the case, the way that game unfolded, I mean, it was a mismatch from the first series. If Navy was favored in that game, wow, that ended up 55-3. So, so I was looking at the Vegas Insider lines, and North Carolina opened as a 19.5 point favorite over Syracuse. It's now up to 22. Appalachian State opened as a 20.5 point favorite over Charlotte. That's down to 17. So similar moves in those two games. Interestingly enough, all games involving schools in North and South Carolina, right? Interesting. Hey, let's do one more topic before we take a break, and that is the national anthem. We are going to, all eyes are going to be on the national anthem in all games, right? Football games that are being played in the college and pro level, certainly with the Chiefs and Texans on Thursday night. But what did Bob Bowlesby say about the national anthem? And have either of the coaches, Chris Klieman or Les Miles, been asked about what players might do during the anthem?
Well, Bob Bowlesby mentioned yesterday that I guess it was to be determined how exactly they were going to handle it. Under normal circumstances, players wouldn't be out on the field because of marching bands. But now with all that uncertainty, bands maybe not being out on the field, I guess there is an actual opportunity for players to be out there to partake in the national anthem. It sounded like they were going to make a decision soon on that as a conference. But just from the way he talked, it sounded like if they're out on the field and the players want to make some kind of team statement about what's going on in the world right now, he would be okay with it. I personally don't know what Chris Klieman thinks about it. Jesse, has Les spoken to this?
He hasn't much, but I will say that a couple weeks ago we covered this, myself and Gary Bedore, on a very hot day on Lawrence's campus. They had the women's basketball team organized a 2-mile march across campus for Black Lives Matter, and I can tell you that there were football players as a part of that, and Les Miles was a part of that. So I would not be surprised at all if that did take place and players were allowed to, as you mentioned, make whatever sort of political statement they did want to make with that, just because KU has been very open to it. And Jeff Long has been very open, the athletic director, talking about how he wants these students to be the change if that's what they want to be. And words are words, but actions are actions. And he's kind of mentioned that a lot here over the past few months. It is sort of awkward, though, as you mentioned, Kellis, because it's sort of like, when you go to charity events and there's a national anthem, like a charity basketball game, and you're sort of like, what are we doing here? Like let's just play this charity basketball game. It's just going to be, it's almost, if they do a national anthem before the game with no fans, it is sort of kind of like usually we think that sort of thing is done with the fans in mind. So doing it without fans is sort of an interesting concept because it's just not something that we're totally used to. But yeah, if that does happen and there is something that takes place, then I think KU football players will be allowed to make whatever statement they want. And I think this is probably a change from what would have happened 5, 10, 15 years ago and the views of coaches, which earlier on they would have been very against this sort of thing. But I think just kind of how the world has changed in recent times, I think that these players will be allowed to make whatever statement that they want to make.
Yeah, I don't think any coach or coaching staff will stop players from doing whatever they want to do during the anthem, whether it's kneel. I think that would be the option, right? Kneeling during the anthem, or at least during the start of the anthem. So we'll have to see. Both games on television, and I suspect that the anthem will be a story as college football ramps up in a bigger way this weekend. So, okay, let's take a break here, and we'll be back to talk about the seasons of these teams. It's not just a COVID topic. We can talk about the Wildcats and the Jayhawks football teams as well. We'll be right back. Hey, it's Blair. We have a special subscription offer for SportsBeat KC listeners, unlimited digital access to the Kansas City Star's award-winning sports coverage. Sign up now for 1 year of Sports Pass for access to all the sports news, features, and columns presented on the kansascity.com site, and it's only $30. That's a 40% savings off our regular rate. Your subscription will automatically renew after the initial term at $50 unless you tell us to cancel. Your subscription helps support the sports coverage of kansascity.com and the Kansas City Star, and that support has never been more important. Please visit kansascity.com/SportsBeatKC offer to get this special offer. And as always, thanks for listening. Okay, back with Kellis Robinett, who covers Kansas State, and Jesse Newell, who covers Kansas. And Kellis, the Wildcats go into the season with the luxury of a returning starting quarterback, not only a returning starter, but quite a veteran. And I think that gives K-State a really nice leg up for a program that's looking to go back to a bowl game this year. There's some holes in other places, but when you get the quarterback returning, that is a big advantage.
Yeah, well, not only do you have the quarterback back, but you've got the coach back. And traditionally, college football, pro football, any real level of football, if you've got those two things, you're probably going to have a good season. And just traditionally, every senior quarterback at Kansas State who's had previous years of starting experience, whether it be 1, 2, very few have had 3 like Skylar has, but he's one of the few who will be a 4-year starter. They've all ended with at least 9 wins, and some of them have ended with conference championships, 11-win seasons. It's been kind of crazy how that's worked out. It's like the one missing link for some of these teams. If they've got a quarterback with experience, they're really good. If they don't, they're kind of a second-tier group. And it's just kind of funny to me. I know that there are a lot of people out there who nationally who have looked at Kansas State and they say, well, they have the fewest returning starters in the Big 12. They're going to struggle. And while that is true, so many of the players are going to be relying on this year played last year. You've got Joshua Youngblood, a wide receiver. He didn't start last year, but he was a freshman All-American. Harry Trotter, he didn't start last year, running back, but he saw hundreds of carries. He was a very reliable player. And they've got other guys who got in and played at that position last year and showed what they were worth. And on defense, they do actually have a lot of really good talent at positions that matter. Obviously, the question is offensive line. Do they have enough personnel to block for Skylar Thompson and allow him to get the ball to these playmakers? But he knows what it takes to win in this offense. And, I mean, just look at Chris Klieman's track record. We talked about Kansas State's track record with a veteran quarterback. Klieman, the last few quarterbacks he's actually gotten to coach up and evolve have been Carson Wentz, Easton Stick, the guy at North Dakota State now who's going to be a first-round pick. It all is very optimistic about – it all paints a very optimistic future about at least what is possible for Skyler this season.
How about, as an aside, the North Dakota State football team this fall, they're in the Missouri Valley, and the Missouri Valley is one of the leagues that said they weren't going to play a fall schedule, try to play in the spring, but you could play non-conference games in the fall. So North Dakota State is playing one non-conference game this fall against Central Arkansas sometime in October, and one of the reasons is to showcase the quarterback for the NFL draft. So, hey, also, Kellis, before I forget, does K-State pick up where it left off on defense with a new coordinator this year?
I think they do. It's never an easy transition to go from one coordinator to the next under these circumstances, given that Joe Klanderman, the new defensive coordinator, did not get a traditional spring practice session in to install his defense. He didn't really even have a traditional preseason camp to do it, just because guys have been in and out and all the stuff we already talked about. But he's been a Klieman disciple forever. He was with him in North Dakota State. They won a lot of games there. They actually thought about just going ahead and making him the defensive coordinator when they moved from North Dakota State to Kansas State. And he was in charge of the secondary last season, which was their strong suit on defense. So if you're going to make a transition from Scotty Hazelton, who was their defensive coordinator last year, to anybody else, I think this is probably the guy to go with, just because he's not going to come in and make a bunch of changes. The players know him. They like him. They respect him. And I think he'll be able to hit the ground running. By no means do I think he'll be perfect, but I think he's a capable defensive coordinator, and I don't think you'll see much of a drop-off at all on defense, just given the personnel they've got back. Their best player on the entire team is Wyatt Hubert at defensive end. Their linebackers, Elijah Sullivan and Justin Hughes, are 23 and 24 years old. These guys are players who don't need a lot of coaching at this point, so I think they'll be fine.
All right. Hazelton, of course, off to Michigan State in the offseason. All right, Jesse. It's always about the quarterback at KU. Ever since Todd Reesing, it's always been about the quarterback at KU. And we know a little bit more about what's going to happen perhaps on Saturday with both players, both top candidates. Perhaps, I don't know if sharing the position is the right way to describe it, but I wouldn't be surprised if both leading candidates took snaps against Coastal Carolina.
Yeah, it's crazy. I talk with everybody about this, it seems like, but I just can't believe how many times KU gets to this point in the season, 5 or 6 days before, and they don't have a quarterback selected. I mean, it is just stunning. There can't be – how many teams in America do you think do this? I mean, there can't be more than 10, right?
When it happens, it's such an unusual thing at a school, right? Because I can't remember the last time they had this, a quarterback battle that went to the opening game. Well, at Kansas, it happens all the time.
It's happened 4 of the last 5 years. I wrote about this last week. 4 of the last 5 years, KU football's coach has not named a starter before the actual game. Basically has said, you're going to see the starting quarterback when they run out there with the first series. And I mean, I'm just thinking there can't be more than 10 FBS schools that do this in the course of any given year. And KU has had that happen 4 of the last 5 years. I mean, the odds of that are just so minuscule. It's pretty crazy. And so Thomas McVitie, Miles Kendrick, we'll see. I mean, last week, Les Miles said he wants to pick one and stick with them. That's what he did last year with Carter Stanley, and it worked out pretty well for the most part. Then this week he says, no, both those guys are going to rotate and play. Who the heck knows? We don't know. Nobody knows. So we'll see how tricky they get against Coastal Carolina. I still think it's the old cliche, but it's a cliche because it's true. If you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none. You want one guy to step up and rise up and take this job. And I would guess right now, just kind of based off the tea leaves, that Thomas McVitie probably has the slightest of edges here. So potentially he'll get the first go round with KU. But it's sort of interesting to hear Kellis talk about how K-State lost so many returners, lost so many returning starters, but they bring back guys who are experienced nonetheless. I feel like KU is the opposite of that in the sense that they lost a lot of returning starters, but they don't bring back guys who had a lot of snaps last year. And a lot of this, again, is to their credit because Les Miles, in his first year or first true full recruiting class, did the difficult but correct decision. They got all high school players. I mean, they knew they were going to have big gaping holes at quarterback and at defensive line and at offensive tackle and in the secondary. So the urge is to go out there and just grab and pluck a bunch of JUCO players and immediately fill them in and have them be starters. And, we pay a little bit in the long term, but we get some short-term results. The coaching staff did not do that. So this is the bill due for some of the previous sins from KU football, and it's very difficult to do this, but for the long-range vision, it is the proper thing and the right thing to do. Having said that, yeah, KU has some major issues right now, probably on defensive line, on secondary, at offensive tackle, and we just mentioned at the quarterback position. So I think it's sort of fascinating to see kind of that play out because you talked about, Kellis talked about K-State having, hey, these guys are ready to step in. I think a lot of KU's guys are not ready to step in, if that makes any sense. So they're going to get a little bit of a trial by fire here, but we'll see how they perform against Coastal Carolina. And as I mentioned before, kind of reading those tea leaves and reading the Vegas lines, it might be that KU is in a little bit of a healthier shape right now than the team that's coming to Lawrence here on Saturday.
Right. Okay, I know you guys did this for the Kansas City Star and the Wichita Eagle. You predicted a final record. You went through game by game. Let's just go with the final record. Kellis, remind us, what did you pick in 10 games for the Wildcats to finish in 2020?
I picked them to go 7-3, and I didn't get a single nasty reply on Twitter, so that means I'm probably being way too optimistic about it. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm drinking the purple Kool-Aid right now. I like the experience they've got back. Just like we said, quarterback, coach. I think they'll find a way to manage COVID a little bit better than some other teams, and they'll sneak 7 wins in there.
And we're not even talking about bowl prospects for anybody this year. There's some have been canceled, some have not, but we just don't know anything about the bowl games, do we? Or am I mistaken? Did I miss something?
Well, to show you how little is known, right before a few weeks ago, an assistant from one of the bowl directors, I don't know, is there a national bowl director? This is a horrible.
The Bowl Association.
The Bowl Association. An assistant who works for the president of the Bowl Association contacted me and said we should know real soon what the bowl situation is. If you'd like an interview with him, we can arrange that. I said, yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to know this. And that interview has been postponed every single week for about 2 months now. So I don't think they know what's going to happen. My guess is we're not going to see many bowl games at all. But that's just I just don't see it being a thing that you can do this season, telling teams, oh, we're going to ship you off to a neutral city and play. But it would be a good deal for KU because if they need teams to fill bowls, they might just say anybody who wants to play can do it. Get a chance to be on the streak.
That's a 2-8 KU. Oh, did I just spoil it, Jesse? I know what you picked KU to finish. So
yeah, you might have spoiled it. I've seen CBS Sports. They do the bowl projections, and Kansas was in there. So, yeah, you might be onto something, fellas. They're going to ship them to the Texas Bowl against somebody, and, they're going to break their long bowl skid because any team that is any team is invited to the bowls this year if that potentially happens. But I do want to shout out one of my Twitter followers. I put up my crystal ball picks, which I did pick KU 2-8, and his response was, that old September feeling of Jesse crushing my KU football hopes. I got to say it feels good. So that was the response I got, Kellis. And unfortunately for KU football, usually when I crush KU football dreams and hopes, it's not that far off because there have been no 4-win seasons for this program in any year in the last decade. So, 2 wins for KU. Actually, I think that would be a pretty decent year. That's giving them the Coastal Carolina win. And one of my bold predictions was that KU breaks its Big 12 road skid, which they have had going since, 2008. They won at Iowa State in 2008. They have not had a Big 12 road victory since then. It seems like maybe they can pull one off this year when there are limited or no fans potentially out there. But 2-8, and again, for KU football, if that happens, I actually would not think that's a disappointing year based off of all the things I talked about earlier, where this was already going to be a rebuilding year. And if they're able to pull off this one non-conference game and then surprise somebody in the Big 12 slate, I think that'd be okay.
All right, guys. Great catching up with you, and looking forward to watching a couple of football games this weekend. The offerings haven't been, too good so far in college football. Really missed
They've
the
been
big.
bad. You can say it. Week 0 was
They have been. I really missed Labor Day weekend. It's just a glorious college football weekend. It's the weekend college football has to itself, and I really missed the games this weekend. But Big 12 coming back on Saturday. SEC starts on September 26th. I know there's also some ACC games this weekend as well. So, all right, Kellis, Jesse, thanks a lot, guys. We'll talk to you again soon.
All right, sounds good.
That'll do it for today. Thanks to our production staff of Derek Donovan, Randy Mason, Beth Welsh, Jeff Rosen, Chris Fickett, and Savannah Smith. Tip of the cap to Kellis Robinett and Jesse Newell for talking college football in the Sunflower State. You can read their stuff in the show notes and on kansascity.com. Hey, earlier in the episode, you heard me talk about the Sports Pass offer. It still stands. It's still a good one, $30 for a year's worth of sports coverage, and that includes Sports Extra that comes with the e-edition. There's more than 50 additional pages of national sports coverage today. Well, here's an even better offer. Buy the entire Kansas City Star product. Sports news, features, commentary, and analysis, the whole thing. You get all of the stories written by my talented colleagues, plus additional news, sports, and business coverage with the e-edition. The details can be found at account.kansascity.com/subscribe. That's account.kansascity.com/subscribe. Whether it's the Sports Pass or the full subscription, you're getting and supporting the best sports and news coverage in Kansas City and helping us produce programs like SportsBeat KC. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back on Wednesday with another episode.